to the Viva La Vulva podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kara Quant, and would like to thank you for joining me today. I have a special guest, and this is a second time on the podcast. Her name is Sierra Sullivan, and she is a pussy oracle and just all around amazing woman her mission in life is to empower women to tap more into their feminine power and energy, especially through the pussy. So I thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Sierra.
It's always my honor. So happy to be here.
Yes.
Mhm.
So today we are talking all about female ejaculation, or as history has called it, Amrita. I think that's how I'm pronouncing it correctly. And female ejaculation has been very controversial, especially within the medical community. And it's so crazy because it's been written about for more than 2,000 years when I was doing some research. 2,000 years, and we are still not able to come up with a definitive, like, this is what it is. There's been a controversy about whether it's urine, whether it's not urine, what is going on with it. So I wanted to give some information to the audience as to what I have seen and heard and the research I've done around it. And so giving you some, before we get started with talking about Amrita, I wanted to give everyone some anatomy terms on it. So um, we'll be using urethra, or I'll be using urethra to talk about it. And urethra is where urine comes out of, but there is, and that's the urethra is located at the top of the vagina. So if you are laying down, for the vulva owners out there, if you are laying down, the urethra is at the top. And so there's something called paraurethral glands, which are also known as Skene's glands and ducts that are located around the urethra. And they say that that is where the female prostate kind of lies. And so it's found in women, and the Skene's glands, like I said, that's where the female prostate lies. And so, doing some research, I came across this article that is in the Journal of Sexual Medicine, and it was published in 2014, and it's titled "Nature and Origin of Squirting in Female Sexuality." So is also considered squirting. And they did this study with 7 women, so it's not very big study, but it basically was looking at these women who had experienced female ejaculation in the past, and they were open to doing the study. And so they did an ultrasound of their bladder before sexual stimulation, during sexual stimulation, and then after sexual stimulation or after squirting. And so they did samples of these well, they say urine, but of the fluid. So they did samples of the fluid, and basically they found that before sexual stimulation, there was some fluid that contained uric acid, urea, and creatinine, which is all found in urine, actual urine. When they did samples of the fluid after sexual stimulation or after squirting, they found all of those same things, but they also found something called PSA, or prostatic specific antigen, which is usually found in men. And so that is showing that there might be a difference of location for the female ejaculation compared to urine. And so this was basically a study. Again, it was 7 people, so it wasn't very big. And there haven't been too many studies out there to get the specifics about where this fluid comes from. But they're basically saying, or the results of it were that the fluid is coming from both the bladder and some areas around the urethra or the periurethral glands. So that is some of the research that I did in looking up the nature and the origin of squirting. And again, this has been talked about for 2,000 years or more than 2,000 years, and it was originally called Amrita. So, and I know that Sierra Sullivan has been doing a lot of research and discussions around Amrita. So I wanted you to give us a little bit more information about what you or what does Amrita mean? Where does it come from? Like what is it about?
I love all that research. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. The science versus the spirituality, right?
Yes.
And the blend of the two.
And the blend of the two.
You know, blend of the two. So it's been Amrita, which is a Sanskrit word. It literally means the elixir of immortality, the elixir of life. And it's supposedly what they're talking about is the actual fluid, the gushing fluid that comes out of a woman when she's very aroused and having very sexual stimulation and whatnot. And they believed back in the ancient times that this fluid was very sacred and can be used for lots of different healing things, and that it was like a blessed thing to have it come out of a woman. And so I actually am still doing research to find out exactly what they would use it for. But I've been experimenting with my own uses of it, and it's been pretty profound. Very profound, actually.
Yeah. So what got you interested in exploring about the sacredness of it or just exploring it in general?
Well, I remember in my early 20s, I was off, or maybe it was actually my late 20s. A friend of mine at the time was reading Deborah Sundall's book, which is called the G Spot, Female Ejaculation. And I remember thinking, what is this? I'd never heard of such a thing. It just was like not even on my radar. And here there was a whole book about it. And so I bought the book and I started reading. And I actually had attended a little workshop where somebody had described it, and I thought, okay, if this is possible for women, then let's figure out how I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
And while I read the book for the most part, and I tried to attempt it, I didn't quite master it at the time. But then it was like a year or two later, I was in a relationship with a long-term relationship with a man, and we had been fooling around and we're soon. Oh, actually, no, that's not true. I played with myself at one point and I noticed that a lot of fluid came out. Not as much as can come out, but I was like, oh, I think I just ejaculated. And it was kind of like, oh, okay, possible. But I don't remember. And it was my own touch, and I, was masturbating, and I was like, well, I don't know how I did it or what I did, but at least I know that I can do it. So that was like sort of like a one-trick pony in the moment. I didn't really have another experience until a year or so later, when I was having some experiences with my man at the time. And next thing you know, I literally, it just started happening. I just started like squirting everywhere. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is that moment. This is what, and at the time, I remember it was a stimulation between, I had some very intense clitoral stimulation, which was, I was using the magic wand at the time,
which is very
more
intense clitoral
potent
stimulation.
vibrator.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, very intense, not for the faint of heart, and not necessarily that great, I hear, for you ultimately long term.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was helpful to activate it. And I was also receiving internal stimulation with his hand, I believe. And so the two combined were the perfect thing for me to be able to ejaculate. And once I really saw that that's what had been happening, then we were able to, like, it was like, oh, that's what it feels like. That's what stimulates me to have it happen. Then I was able to repeat it. And then from there, I got super intrigued, and I thought, okay, well, so what is this all about, and how often can I do it, and how else can I do it, and can it be combined with different types of orgasms? And that began my more physical experience with it. But as I became more connected to some of the women's work that I was stewarding at the time, I realized that there was also this other piece that was a sacred part of it. It wasn't just this sexual flow of fluid, that there really was a lot of sacredness to it. And mostly, I would say probably in the last 3 years, when I got initiated into doing the pussy oracle work, or service rather, that I'm now offering and bringing to the world and
Yes.
stewarding,
Yeah.
that's when the two hand in hand. Now they've always been very, very sacred to me, but it's gotten more advanced in my understanding of how sacred this fluid actually is in the last
Mm.
3 years.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, not sure if I answered the question
Yeah,
fully,
no,
but
you did. And what have you seen as its power? Because I know there is a lot of power in it.
For me, I use it for rituals and to activate and change the alchemical process of life itself and things that I either want to see differently or be different. So, what I came to understand and how I think I started realizing that if it was true for my body or what felt true for my body, again, science, I've been playing around with how can I get some science people to have me track this.
Mhm.
Um, Still working on that. But what I've discovered is that this conversation, so before I tell you about what I use it for, there's this beautiful, the conversation that you brought up in the beginning is, what is it, right? Is it pee? What is it made of? If it comes from the urethra, then it must be pee. And all the ways that not as many people as you'd think have, because there's really not a lot of research. Like you said, there's that
No,
one
there is
study that was
no,
only
there's
7 people.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it
not a
was
lot of
like
no.
not a lot of studies. And also, you can't, you've got the scientific and then there's the esoteric. So it's like, okay, either way, how do you, I'm sort of perplexed in how to figure this out myself. But what I've come to understand based on just knowing what comes out of me at different times is that it's directly the potency of it being straight up just maybe sexual fluid, which all of it, I just want to give a caveat that I believe all sexual fluid is sacred because it's creation energy, it's the seed of life. It's highly charged, activated fluids that are coming out of us because we're in a heightened state, and it's the most godlike we can get because we're in pleasure, divine, creative energy. So
Yeah.
in that regard, it's all sacred to some degree or another, and really intention is what creates anything to be something. So whatever we say it is, we give it that
It is.
energy. And
Yeah.
like, right, it is. And if like, and even if you think about the Dr. Emoto studies with water and the blessings and how water transforms to the properties of the feeling sense and how much energy, good energy we're giving it, or funky negative energy we're giving it, like it can molecularly change
Mm,
based on that.
mm-hmm.
So I believe the same is true for our sacred fluids. And depending on the state of mind that I'm in, or how the orgasm or the activation of the water is flowing out of my body, determines the ultimate potency of that elixir at the end of the day.
Mm,
And I've noticed that depending on the time of the month, it can be slightly different depending on how much I'm either like available to my own pleasure and surrender, or how much I'm efforting to have it happen, which at times does happen. You're like, all
yeah.
right, let's,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
force the orgasm or
Yeah.
all the
Mm-hmm.
ways, you know. So, and I've noticed that it distinctly has different, literally flavors, textures, not textures so much, but colors. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that the amount of urine properties that are, based on the amount of connection to spirit that one is in and
Mm-hmm.
fully surrender that one is in when she's ejaculating.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been collecting my Amrita to kind of see what is it showing up as when I'm in different states.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to be a little bit more scientifically minded to really, you know, get the fullness of it. But what I've been downloading and what actually in my Pussy Oracle service and all the ways that I've been communicating with Pussy on this planet and nature, I've been feeling like I've been giving this information that the potency, that the alchemical process that happens in a woman's body, where on one hand it can come out very much like pee, it comes through the urethra, it comes through
Yeah.
all the glands you just, right? So it's going to have essences of that in it.
Yeah.
Some say it comes from the bladder. Some say it comes from the blood and the white blood cells, and that creates the fluid. I mean, again, it's this very mysterious.
Mysterious.
Science
Yeah.
doesn't feel
Mm-hmm.
mysterious, right? This is the beauty of this. It's mysterious. So I'm like, okay, so if we're working in realms of mystery and nobody can explain this, well, my sense is that the direct amount of ability that woman has to access her own pleasure on her terms, in her own way, in her surrender, will change the potency of what actually comes out of her. So if she's and I mentioned this in a course that I recently taught, there's a difference between extracting your waters versus letting your waters flow.
Mm.
And we know that there are tricks and techniques out there that can actually cause a woman to squirt, and people teach it, and you can Google it on YouTube, and there's many courses and many videos out there. They'll say, touch the G spot, do it this way, make this
Yeah.
motion, and
Mm-hmm.
you'll squirt, which is certainly true. But I believe that, but if she's being forced to squirt, if it's just a technique that's like extracting the waters, then the potency of the elixir part of it, the Amrita part of it, will be less, I don't want to say sacred, but less, well, sacred, I guess, in a
Yeah.
way, right?
Yeah.
Because
It's
it's being,
more forced.
yeah, it's forced
Yeah.
versus if it's just allowed to flow on a woman's own terms because she's deeply in connection and embodied in her divinity and her pleasure and her knowing of what's happening versus where we can and the society can be very checked out when it comes to sexuality,
Yeah.
right? Not fully in the connection and the consciousness, then it changes the chemical makeup. So
Mm-hmm.
if I'm, going for a quickie and I ejaculate, my ejaculate might have more urine in it. But if I'm truly in a divine connection with my beloved and we're doing a very sacred, maybe sex magic kind of energy, and we're really spending the time and working up to this pleasure place, which is always important for any vulva owners to
Yes.
have the slow buildup and allow it to get to the place where it is more pure in the sense of not urine. But I feel that it's literally, we have the power within us as women to alchemize. And like, the alchemists used to change lead to gold. Well, we're literally changing what could be pee to
Mm-hmm.
nectar, right?
Mm.
It literally can be transformed within us, where maybe it would come out as more like pee on one hand, and other times it's completely a whole different substance. It doesn't smell like pee. It's light. It's
Mm-hmm.
clearer.
Mm-hmm.
It dries quicker. It's like this magical
It's
substance.
just different, yeah.
So,
And I have had experience with it, female ejaculation. I've been able to do it for a couple years now, and I do understand that. I do understand that there is a difference. So me doing research on my own for myself, I know that there is a difference, and there is sometimes where it smells more like urine, and then there is sometimes where it does not smell like urine at all. And so, with those studies that I or was talking about earlier, I do believe that is the case. That yeah, it's coming out of the urethra. There is going to be some urine substance that's within it, but that does not have to be the case all the time. And do also know about the forcing versus the not forcing, allowing it to happen versus wanting efforting it to happen to happen, and that there is a huge
mhm.
difference. There's absolutely a difference between the two, but it does feel better to allow myself to let it happen naturally than to force it to happen. And I think that is through the pleasure practices that you're talking about. Just allowing myself to take baths or to just to if I am with a partner, slowly moving my way through to penetrative sex rather than just like starting it out in the beginning, so that there are ways to get more into the nectar part of it than the urine part of it.
Hey, mama. Totally. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Yeah, and I have
Mhm.
been reading this book called Pussy, a Reclamation by Mama Gina, and I absolutely recommend it to everyone that is listening to this because it is such a powerful book about just reclaiming our pussies and just knowing the power of it. And she talks about how you can use pussy juice, so not accessing Amrita or female ejaculation, but just pussy juice in general, and using it and putting it behind your ears, or just using to go to like a meeting, to enhance your meeting or whatever it may be, that is just that powerful and potent. Do you think that there's any
Mhm.
difference between the pussy juice and the Amrita?
Um, I think that they're in a similar vein, obviously. And pussy juice is very, like I said, all sexual fluids are so sacred, and pussy juice has its own potency in and of itself. And I even love that it's designed pussy juice just as like straight up pussy juice, just you can reach down, grab some right now, right? That ultimately is, it's scented a certain way it's filled with pheromones. And so it has an activating quality for magnetism of things that we desire and humans that we want to bring in. And whereas, so it's all very beautiful and perfect and magical. And I'll say, put pussy juice on lots of things. Wherever you think there needs to be fine feminine energy. I mean, obviously be mindful of, what's the word? Hygienics.
Hygiene, yeah.
But,
As
at
a
the same
doctor, yes,
time,
I do have to keep that in mind. But yeah, I mean,
right.
it really is. It's the medical side versus the esoteric side. It's like I do understand that, if you put pussy juice on everything, then there is bacteria and things within it. However, there's also a magical and side that I feel like many women haven't explored and can if they use pussy juice on stuff.
Totally,
Yeah.
exactly. Um, like for example, I have right now on my wall that I'm looking at over here, we do an event every year for couples, and we have very specific desires of certain couples that we want to attend. And so we made up like as if they've ordered the forms, like, if you see in The Secret and you make up the check for $1 million and you have it on your altar or whatever, that would be a really good thing to put some pussy juice on, right? Like take some of that pussy juice, put it on your little piece of paper, have it in your sacred space or on your vision board, or put pussy juice on your vision board so that you're activating the power of pussy into your visions with the physical chemical, liquid that comes from your pussy. So it's good for a lot of things regards to that. Amrita is like taking that and using like a concentrate, right? So imagine like if that's potent, it's a concentrated potency. So it's right. It's like what am I like a concentrated oil where you only need a drop, right? Versus a spray bottle where you're going to need a lot more, right? So it feels right. So it feels like that's the distinction. Whereas they're both very powerful, but when you collect Amrita, which is a bit tricky to do, it's not like you got to kind of be a little bit seasoned to be able to collect it, and be a little bit nuts like I am. No, not nuts, but be a little out there to play with it.
To
but
collect
it's so
it, yeah.
than, like there's a lot of women who do rituals with their moon blood, and that's very potent as well, and all sorts of ways that we've always used fluids for sacred ceremonies and whatnot. So so I would say, it's just the difference between is, one is just maybe like a lighter fare and one is more concentrate and has more potency.
I was gonna say I was gonna ask, what vessels do you use to collect it? Are they small? Are they big? Are they you were saying that you put you may have one like as a necklace. Like where do you find those?
Yeah, well, no, I feel like I need to do a show and tell. So hopefully the internet stays stable enough. But I have this little altar here where I have some containers. So this is one container. I just bought it at Michael's, where I didn't collect it in this. This is where I've store it. And this has a little bit of Amrita mixed with a few other waters that I did for a ceremony. So this has a bunch of blessed water together. And then so then I have these little actually, I got it all set up here, but so then I've got this is my recent collection I was just telling you about before we started this recording, but this is a blend of Amrita with plant plasma, actually, which is a thing for a whole other time. So this is just a jar that I have it sitting in, and then I have these, which I haven't filled them yet. Let's see if I can get them up and out, but I have these little bottles that I bought. I don't even know where I bought them. You could probably get them online, but this is like a little, there's like a little necklace that I'm going to wear. So it's like just like a little medicine container of sorts or something. So the idea is that I've been having it blessed on my altar, and I'm going to fill these little vessels. I've got 2 of them, and we'll wear it around our neck and see what kind of energy gets created. And some of the things that I've done in the past with My Amrita is I've done rituals where I have soaked tax documents. Like I was like, okay, I got this tax lien on me on something I didn't know I needed to owe money for, and I couldn't get a hold of them. We were back and forth, back and forth, and finally I was like, I'm done with this. I'm not going to try to get a hold of the IRS. They're so impossible to get a hold of. I'm just going to soak that paper in pussy juice, which was my Amrita, and send it away, like juice it up, and I'm like, I haven't gotten a letter since, and I believe we got a letter recently that said it had been paid off, and I'm not sure if that's the same bill or not. I have to go back and ask my husband, but it feels like it, it activated it, and it,
and
made
it's
it
gone.
go away. Yeah, it's gone.
Yeah.
And yeah, and like the other day I was just sharing with you, we did a water blessing ritual on my friend's land. She wanted to help activate the land. It's a very dry desert environment, and somebody up the way had dammed up the reservoir, and they wanted to unlock the waters. I'm like, all right, I got just the thing for you. So we did this water ritual, and I'd actually the little vessel I showed you with the mixed water. We used some of that, and we blessed some water and put some plant plasma in it. And then we had the vessel sitting out overnight out in the nature, and a moth had flown into this, this big container and looked dead. Like when we went back to put the vessel inside for the night, my friend was like, what's the moth doing? Oh my gosh. And we're like, no, it's part of the land. It's great. And the moth was there all night. And then that night I actually ended up collecting the Amrita I just showed you. I was like, oh, well, I'm going to I'm having some fun with my man. I could feel the potency of it was a solstice, actually. It was solstice ejaculate. Today's the new moon. So it's all bit of a
which is even more powerful, right?
So it's a good time to activate the waters. And so I brought back the Amrita that I had collected, and then I added it to the vase that had the sacred water we had blessed the night before. And the moth was dead from all I could see all night, been in there dead. And I poured the Amrita in, and then, I just sort of reconsecrated the altar. And then I went away for a half an hour, and then we came back to do a closing ceremony where we were going to actually put the water on the land and move it to another vessel. And when we came back and poured the water from the vase into this vessel that we were going to take and then walk around the land with, as my friend was pouring the water into the vessel, I could see that the moth legs were moving, and I thought, this is odd. And so she must have it must have all gotten poured in the vessel. And we walked the land and walked up to the sacred mount that they had created on their land, and poured it out. And the moth landed on the ground, wings dried, and then it flew up and flew to the top of the little mound where the water was poured, hung out, and then flew away. Wow. I was like, what? Did we just bring a moth back to life with the power of Amrita?
I think that was the case. What else could it be? What else could it be?
It's the elixir of immortality. So I'm like, well, it's, maybe I need to do those types of experiments. I don't want to go drowning moths, but
do it a couple more times to see if it's really the case. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
A lot of magic going on that.
Yes. So yes, I do know that I've seen it. No, I've seen it in my life. Even with the pussy juice and putting it in the back of my ears when I was doing an interview, actually more as like a meeting for this thing that I was going to do with Viva La Vulva, and it went very well after. And I was like, I mean, I didn't use the Amrita, but I used pussy juice, and it actually went very well. So I was like, the power of the pussy.
Totally.
The power.
Call it pussy magic. Pussy magic.
Yes, pussy magic. So I was going to ask I know that you've had other classes before talking about Amrita. How can vulva owners access their female ejaculation, their Amrita that we're talking about? I mean, I know you said that there's a lot of, YouTube videos and things like that, but, any tips or tricks that you have seen, and I can give some information from me, but anything that you've experienced that you want to talk about how to access?
I think the biggest thing is your willingness to let it happen, right? A lot of times this is why a lot of people also think it's pee, is that oftentimes it feels like you're going to pee because it's all in that same area, and that area is being, it's being highly charged, and there's a lot of sensations, and then it can feel like you're going to pee. So most women will hold back. They're like, oh, I'm not going to do that. So you got to be willing to literally get messy, regardless of what comes out. Like, be willing to get messy, be willing to take your time and not try to have it happen. Like, the more we think we're going to have it happen or try to make it happen, I think the harder it is, because then our mind is in the way, and then our body, we're not in our bodies. And I believe that it's a truly an embodiment thing. And that's why oftentimes you'll hear women say, "Oh my God, it just happened." Well, how did that happen? Like, they've been trying and trying, and then boom, it happened, right? Because it's really a sort of, it's about surrender, it's about relaxing, it's about allowing, all of these divine feminine qualities. So forcing or clenching or tempting or having it extracted out of you, while again it could work, it just, the difference for me feels like it's almost like sexual sovereignty. How do you allow yourself to surrender so deeply into what's happening, into the pleasure that you're activating or receiving or giving yourself or receiving from someone else? And that's a key, because if we're clenching, which is what often happens, in some way we're clamping down or trying to force or squeezing, it makes it a bit trickier. That's what I found. So it's all about the right environment, relaxing, and also really holding your sexuality and your pussy and all of that area as sacred. To me, that's been like, my biggest, battle cry, if that's not even the right word, but in this conversation, is the sacredness of all of this. We forget when we're talking about anything sexual, it can lose its sacredness for the majority of people out there. And this is a very sacred thing. Pussy is a portal of life. And so if we can recognize it as this majestic portal of life that is all human beings have come through, we can give it the reverence that it deserves. And then it will give us, reverence back. So.
If we appreciate it and give it attention and hold it as sacred, then we will get in return what we've asked for. Yes, I do agree with that. And what I have been told and what I have experienced for myself is, well, first going to the bathroom before. So I think just emptying the bladder before really does help. So the mind gets off of feeling like you have to pee. So if you feel like you have to pee, just go pee. Or even if you don't have to pee, just going pee just to do it. And then once you're done with that, what I have done is just laying down a towel or something that is not going to. So I'm not going to think about me messing up the sheets or messing up whatever, by laying something out. So I feel like that those two things already relax me in allowing for female ejaculation to happen. And then, not forcing it, because forcing it is going to just not allow things to happen. Like, the fluid is not going to come out if it is forced. So relaxing, allowing things to go slowly, a lot of foreplay, things like that can help with activating those juices. But I would say the first two things are probably the most important. Laying something out so you're not feeling like you are going to mess up anything, and then going to the bathroom before, so you know that what's going to come out is not necessarily going to be urine. So those
beautiful.
are
Totally.
Yes.
Right? Because if we're concerned we're going to mess up the bed, doesn't leave a lot of room for, to just surrender and let go.
No, it doesn't, because you're like, no. And I do remember that sensation of feeling like I needed to urinate, and partners saying, well, it's okay, just allow that to happen. And I'm like, no, but I don't want to pee. Like, I don't want to pee. And so I would hold back rather than letting go. And so it would be more clenching rather than releasing. For me. So I do know what that urine feels like, and going to the bathroom before has helped to release that feeling or that anxiety or that, the thoughts, to not allow myself to be in that moment with either myself or with the partner that I'm with.
That's important. There's a beautiful product out there called Venus Mat. I think the website is venusmatters.com, and that's a great, once you start getting into this, it's definitely a must-have for sexy time because it's
Mm.
designed to be this mat for beautiful sacred sexuality, and then to not have the any of the liquids soak through, because
Oh,
once
it's
you
called
start
a
gushing.
Venus mat.
Yep,
Oh,
a Venus mat.
interesting. I like that. I will look more into that. And
Hmm.
I will also put that in the description for anyone else that wants to look it up.
Yeah,
Cool. I
it's
haven't heard of
important
that.
because once you start gushing, it
What'd you
can.
say?
That's the mysterious thing too. Is like, so once you start gushing, like once the waters are released. Like the other night, I had a beautiful connection with my man, and I mean, I soaked 4 towels and the Venus mat. Like we were just, it was just gushing and you're like, where is this coming from? That's what makes it feel so divine, because you're like, there's not even that much fluid in me. Even if I had pee in me, like it's still like, it wouldn't be, I would have had to really run to the bathroom if that much pee was in me. And it was just
Yeah.
gushing and gushing and gushing. It's the
Mm,
amount that can come out is miraculous,
yeah.
truly.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why, yeah, I don't think it is urine and it's coming from the bladder, but again, we're still that is still out and we still need to do some more research on where it actually comes from, especially that amount of fluid. That amount of
Yeah.
fluid,
And
yes.
I'll just say two other things that I've heard are really potent, and I'm going to experiment with it. When I did some research, I found one woman that would keep Amrita in a spray bottle, and when her husband was grumpy, she would spritz him, and it would literally change his mood. Well, that's
That's
something, right?
hilarious. Yeah.
And then there's these other friends of mine who are somatic sexual healers, and they said that when the women that they work with would release their waters, they would catch it and then they would pour it on their chest, and every woman would feel like this activation happen. They didn't know what was being
Wow.
poured on them. They didn't know that it was their own fluid,
Yeah.
and that they literally have proof that, how much, just proof in the experience of their work and the clients, and how much that fluid is activating. So there's some
Mm,
potency that
mhm,
beyond understand in
mhm.
this fluid, that the only way to find out is be willing to play around with it. If
Try
you're,
it,
if you're,
yes, and to experiment.
yeah,
Yeah.
mm-hmm.
To see magic, like you were saying, right?
It's magic.
Yes, exploring, seeing what happens, using pussy juice, using female ejaculation or Amrita to experiment and see if you can get what you want, desire
Mm-hmm.
from it. It's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
powerful.
mama.
It is pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And the other question that I was going to have, because I feel like there's been statistics about uh, everyone being able to squirt or not everyone being able to squirt. Do you feel like everyone does have that access?
I believe that if you haven't modified anything down there, which I know some women have had surgeries to help with incontinence, or maybe there's been some surgical repair after birth that may have an impact, or even some other surgeries that may have an impact. But if your parts are the way they were when they were born, and even if you've had surgery, I think there's still a possibility. Again, I believe that it's possible for anyone beyond the science, beyond the physical. If we're really committed to what we talked about, the surrender, it's possible. And I believe all of us, and what I've read, especially in Deborah Sundall's books and a few other books, that yeah, we can all do it. It's just a matter of, are we, just like every man can actually experience ejaculate orgasms, right? And yet it takes something for them to retrain where they're used to ejaculating instead of
Mm-hmm.
injaculating. So
Mm-hmm.
for some of us, we have patterns in our sex lives and ways that we've, gotten there or haven't gotten there. And
Mm-hmm.
so the willingness to give spaciousness for women, the key is spaciousness, right? If we're feeling pressured, or we got too much on our mind, or we're not embodied, or we're not feeling safe, or we're not feeling held or comfortable, or we're fearing it's going to be pee, or we're fearing we're going to soak the bed, like all the ways that can get in the way, those are the things you got to be patient with yourself, to practice and play and give
Mm-hmm.
yourself a lot of spaciousness and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of ways that will get you excited and stimulated beyond the, like, I'm going to do this thing, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but I truly believe that every woman once, if not always, had the capacity, and I think probably could have the capacity if she's willing to give it the space and
Mm,
time it deserves
yeah.
to practice and play.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. I agree that every woman has access to it and that there's not a small percentage of people that can ejaculate or squirt or, whatever term you want to use. But I feel like every woman, vulva owner, has that capacity. It's just, surrendering and allowing that to happen.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah,
Amen. That
definitely.
is the key.
Well, coming to a close. So for all of my guests, I have been asking them, and I think I asked you this during your first time on the podcast. But anything, and we've been talking about Amrita, and so, but anything uplifting in terms of stories or facts or knowledge about the vulva that you want to leave our listeners with, since it's called Viva La Vulva.
Hmm. Yeah, and I may be repeating myself from a previous episode, but my core
Okay.
message is my core
Yeah.
message. So the the biggest thing is, we are in a society that has either overly sexualized or overly shamed, or both, this beautiful part of our bodies, which is the vulva, and having an opportunity to get into right relationship with this sacred portal, meaning you're willing and able to look at her, be with her, work out any shame you may have around how she looks or how she's performed or not performed or what she's offered or where she's been, had issues or childbirth or anything at all, to like have a healing connection and have as like Mama Gina would say in her book, which is Pussy, a reclamation, to find that reclamation with this part of ourselves is essential to the evolution of the divine feminine on this planet. And I believe that until all of us have found that beautiful connection and really appreciate that part of ourselves, and from an awe-inspiring place, that we're not going to necessarily be able to get to where we want to go as a society until women have that reverence for our own self and our pussy. So I'd say I like to promote pussy selfies. Snap a shot and be with her. And if you
Yeah.
need sisterhood, reach out to me. I've got a Facebook group. I've got courses. There's ways to not feel alone. Reach out to Mama Gina. She's got courses. There's all sorts of ways. But get in right relationship with how you look, because we're flowers and everyone's unique, and there's no two flowers that are alike, and there's not one that's prettier or less than or more than or anything, and we have to stop that fallacy. And so the more we can actually be in right relationship with how she looks and how they all look, the more that you're going to actually fall in love with yourself as well.
Yes. Beautiful. I love it. Yes, I completely agree with you. Well, I will put all of the information about how everyone can contact Sierra Sullivan in the description, and all the other resources that we discussed in this episode. So I want to thank you so much again, Sierra, for being a part of this episode, being here on the second time on the podcast, on this growing podcast. And so I am just grateful.
Such an honor. Thank you for having me.
Yes. And thank you, everyone, for listening to the Viva La Vulva podcast. I am your host again, Dr. Kara Quant, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.